In a simple rental house in Nanjiang City, Xiao Tian was lying on the dilapidated sofa with a bitter expression, holding a wine bottle in his hand and constantly pouring it into his mouth. He was broken in love and unemployed. Xiao Tian felt that his life was really nonsense. After he was born, he was abandoned and grew up in an orphanage. He finally stumbled and lived until he was 22 years old, thinking about being able to stand out after graduating from college. But God seemed to be making a joke with him. On the day of graduation, his girlfriend said to break up with him, and the next day, a private school that had been contacted a long time ago expelled him directly because they didn't need no teaching. Experienced intern teacher. What a pneuma. Life, it's so tiring. Xiao Tian said, blowing another bottle of wine off, and there were wine bottles all over the floor. Just as he was taking a drink to ease his sorrows, a crisp voice suddenly came in his mind, cold and mechanical. Ding! The Saint Master system of 10,000 realms is activated and binding. The binding is complete. Congratulations to the host, the Saint Master system of 10,000 realms has been activated, and the system will present a gift package for newbies. Please check it by the host. The sudden sound scared Xiao Tian upside down, and suddenly jumped up from the sofa. The wine bottle in his hand fell to the ground, and the glass broke to the ground. But he didn't pay attention to this at all, his eyes were looking around, his face was a little frightened. Who? Don't pretend to be a fool, get out of me. When Xiao Tian spoke, he picked up the beer bottle on the ground and looked around carefully. He grew up in an orphanage, and his fighting skills were at least master level. Host, this system is a freshman system graduated from the Trans-Dimensional Plane System Academy, codenamed 9527. The host can also call me the Saint Master system of 10,000 realms. The goal of this system is to help the host grow into a generation of Saint Master. Another icy and mechanical voice came, echoing in Xiao Tian's mind, making him stiff, and the beer bottle in his hand fell to the ground. Xiao Tian was silly there, the panic and anxiety in his heart disappeared, replaced by deep joy. As an otaku, how can Xiao Tian not know what the system represents? System. Xiao Tian murmured, enduring the excitement in his heart and asked, since you are called the Saint Master system of 10,000 realms, what is your role and how can you help me? Ding! Turn on the system's auxiliary functions. The Saint Master's exclusive skill is activated, and the Saint Master's exclusive skill is activated. The sound of the system sounded again, and then a transparent light curtain appeared in front of Xiao Tian. Name, Xiao Tian Race, Terran Cultivation, Mortal Gong Method, None Teacher's Point, 0 Disciple, None Saint Master's exclusive skills. This skill can be divided into two forms, active and passive. Passive. The host can share the disciple's understanding of the exercises and supernatural powers. Active. The host can share its own perception of the exercises and supernatural powers with the disciples. This skill is divided into two forms, active and passive. Passive. The host's strength cannot be probed. Active. When the host's disciple faces an enemy that is more than one realm above his own strength, the host can activate the skill and obtain it instantly far beyond the enemy's realm and strength. Saint Master's exclusive benefits. Every time a disciple improves a great realm, the host's current realm is raised by 1/10, and a random lottery will be given. System. What is Cheyenne Point? Xiao Tian's gaze was attracted by the big zero. The host can spend the master point to read the source of the current plane, and obtain the power of the current plane. At the same time, the host can use the master point to comprehend and integrate the magical powers learned by itself, or unlock the permission to travel through other planes. The sound of the system sounded, making Xiao Tian's heart suddenly hot. How do you get the teacher's point? Xiao Tian asked, rubbing his hands. If the disciples accepted by the host break through the limit of the plane, they will receive a certain amount of mentor points. Then, system, what planes I can traverse now, Xiangxia? Myth? Legend? Xiao Tianmen asked expectantly. However, the system poured cold water on Xiao Tian, sorry the host, theoretically speaking, all the planes mentioned by the host can shuttle, but at the moment, the host does not have enough mentor points to unlock other planes. That's it, Xiao Tian looked disappointed, but soon calmed down, thinking of a newbie gift package he had obtained before. Xiao Tian couldn't help but get excited. System, what is the novice gift pack? Xiao Tian couldn't help asking. The system's voice sounded, the novice gift package is stored in the system space. Does the host open the gift package? Quick, open it. Xiao Tian said quickly. Congratulations to the host, get 100 mentor points and the permission to randomly unlock a plane. As the system's voice sounded, Xiao Tian showed a surprise expression on his face flushed with excitement, his breathing became rapid, and he couldn't help making a fist. From today onwards, be a glorious saint master of 10,000 realms, pretend to be forced, slap in the face, and teach apprentices. From today on, I am concerned about the growth of disciples and the acquisition of mentorship points. I have a system that crosses the world and enlightens the heavens. System, which plane is unlocked? Xiao Tian calmed down and asked in his heart. A light-quality dice composed of countless pictures appeared in front of Xiao Tian, with pictures constantly flashing on it. Random selection? Let's start the selection, Xiao Tian nodded and said softly. The dice spun up consciously at a uniform speed. 10 seconds later. Stop. The reason why Xiao Tian stopped so late was because he thought the dice was controlled by the system itself. After staring at it for 10 seconds, he realized that the dice was still spinning happily before reacting. The dice stopped for a while. A giant eagle spreads its wings in the air. A man and a woman are standing on the eagle's back. The man's temples are like snow, with a sense of vicissitudes in his eyes, while the woman is icy muscles and bones, as if like a cold fairy. On the upper left of the screen, a few lines of small print slowly emerged at the bottom of Zhongnan Mountain, the tomb of the living dead. Condor Heroes, Extinct Arena. It turned out to be this plane. A strange color flashed in Xiao Tian's eyes, and there were a lot of awesome people on this plane. System, send me there. Xiao Tian said softly, and then a white light flashed, and Xiao Tian's figure instantly disappeared in the rental house. God Carving Plane, Dali, Wuliang Mountain. A white light emerged out of thin air, and then a man in strange clothes appeared on the cliff behind the silent Wuliang Mountain. It was Xiao Tian who had crossed the plane of the carving. Xiao Tian looked around curiously, and then asked in his heart, System, where is this place? Host, this is Wuliang Mountain, where Wuliang Jade Bai is, the system's cold voice sounded. Wuliang Mountain. Xiao Tian couldn't help but shook his head when he heard the system. If it was Tianlong 8 parts, he could still try to take out the Baiming Shengong and Ling Baoyi hidden in Wuliang Cave before Duan Yu. Step, but Duan Yu doesn't know how long he has been dead on this plane of carving. Where is there any chance in the Wuliang Cave? System, how many mentor points are needed to read the origin of the current plane? Xiao Tian found a clean blue stone and sat down, and asked in his heart. Ding! 500 points are needed to fully read the origin of the current plane. The system's voice was cold, without a trace of emotion, like a basin of cold water poured on Xiao Tian. Why are there so many? Xiao Tian couldn't help standing up and asked. The current plane is the plane of the carving of the gods, which belongs to the plane of the golden martial arts, the plane of the female sword of the ancestors, the 8 parts of the dragon, and the plane of the legend of the carving heroes. There are many hidden opportunities in it, so there are more mentor points required to fully understand the origin of the plane. It turned out to be like this, Xiao Tian nodded, with a bit of a stunned expression on his face. The timeline of the gold martial arts plane is very clear and there are traces to follow. There is no problem with the systematic explanation. If this is the case, then focus on reading some of the origins related to Xiaoao sect and Shaolin Temple. Xiao Tian quickly made a decision. In the world of sacred sculptures, the inheritance of the Xiaoao sect has long been cut off, and its reputation is little known. However, the Shaolin Temple was badly injured because of the Fire Master Tuo's murder in the Shaolin Temple, and the mountain was not closed. In contrast, other Kung Fu is much easier to acquire, so Xiao Tian decided to spend his precious Xian points on Xiaoao sect and related parts of Shaolin Temple. Ding! Reading is complete. Consume 90 points of the teacher's grace. Congratulations to the host for obtaining Xiaoao School of Martial Arts Xiaoao Yufeng, Biming Shengong, Lingbo Microstep, Life and Death Talisman, Little Wuxiang Gong, Not Old Chongchen Gong, Tian Shan's Wang Mei Shao, Shaolin School of Wushu Yi Jinjing, Marrow Washing and Shaolin 72 Stunts. The system's voice rang in Xiao Tian's mind, making him a little confused. After a long while, Xiao Tian reacted, his face flushed with excitement. Get rich! The system, consume all the remaining teacher's points, and comprehend Xiaoao Yufeng. Xiao Tian quickly ordered the system in his heart. Xiao Tian also knows about the martial arts of the Jin-style martial arts. Don't look at the system to resolve a lot, but if you want to say that the most valuable one, it is naturally Xiaoao Yufeng. You must know that the name of the Xiaoao school is the source. In this Xiaoao Yufeng, no one of the Xiaoao school can comprehend one or two of it except for the founder of the school, Xiaoao Zai. And Beiming Divine Art and Lingbo Weibu and other Xiaoao unique studies, are all martial arts learned from Xiaoao Yufeng. As Xiao Tian's voice fell, a weak air current suddenly emerged from his body, and then it flowed all over his body, and finally gathered in the Danshan. At the same time, the weak air current rose rapidly at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Xiao Tian only felt that countless martial arts insights suddenly appeared in his mind, as if all the martial arts in the world could be easily grasped. Xiao Tian knew that this was just an illusion caused by his own promotion too fast, but it could not affect his inner excitement. Open the system panel, Xiao Tian ordered in his heart. A light quality panel that only Xiao Tian can see appears. Name, Xiao Tian Race, Terran Cultivation, Hushan Grandmaster Consummation Technique, Happy Wind Teacher's Point, 0 Disciple, None Saint Master's Exclusive Skills. After reading it, Xiao Tian couldn't help but nodded secretly. He knew very well what Hushan Grandmaster's perfect cultivation base represented in the world of the sculpture. We must know that when Huashan talked about the sword for the first time, Wang Chongyang broke through the realm of the Hushan Grandmaster with a piece of innate art, stepped into the innate, defeated the other four musts in one fell swoop, and established the position of the top of the five. Zixadu is the southern emperor and northern beggar, and he is nothing more than the master of the Hushan Grandmaster. In other words, Xiao Tian's current strength, even if he does not rely on the system, is one of the few in the entire divine sculpture world. Then Xiao Tian calmed down and sorted out the martial arts insights that suddenly appeared in his mind. Although the 10 o'clock teacher's point made his comprehension of Xiaoao Yufeng reach the level of entering the room, but it only raised his cultivation to the Hushan Grandmaster consummation. In addition, he understood his most greedy Lingbo Weibu and Biming magical skills. That's it. As for the remaining Tian Shan Jimei hands and a series of martial arts such as the Gazang sword, I can only wait for the opportunity to learn from Xiaoao Yufeng later. Now, it's time to find an apprentice, Xiao Tian said with a smile, touching his chin, and then twirled up Lingbo and disappeared behind the mountain of Wuliang Mountain. Half a month later, a handsome young man wearing a moon-white gown with a cyan soap cloth belt around his waist and soft boots on his feet appeared at the bottom of Zhongnan Mountain. He couldn't help but smile when he looked at the boundary steel of Zhongnan Mountain in front of him. Meaning, Yang would be very unhappy in Chuanzhen sect now. Xiao Tian laughed in a low voice. He came all the way from Dali and heard a lot of news on the way. The most important one was Guojing a month ago. Guo Daxia showed off his power in the Chongyang Palace and led Quanzhen's disciples to repel the thieves who were making trouble in the Chongyang Palace. Let's go up the mountain to see Yangguo first. Xiao Tian glanced at the two Chuanzhen sect Shaoshan disciples not far from the boundary stele of the Zongnan mountain. Brother, it seemed that someone had passed by just now. The Moriyama disciple on the left was wearing the costumes of the 4 generations of Chuanzhen sect disciple. A suspicious color flashed across his face. Junior brother, you are just too worried. This area is obviously open. How can we not see if someone passes by? The Moriyama disciple on the right said with a smile, besides, my Chuanzhen sect is the world's authentic martial arts school. If someone really wants to go up the mountain, they will also submit a greeting card, remove their weapons, and visit them respectfully. That is true, the disciple Moriyama on the left nodded, and then stopped struggling with the matter. And Xiao Tian, at this moment, has already gone along Zongnanshan Road to the back of Zongnan Mountain. The bright moon hangs high, and countless clear brilliance is scattered, and the back of Zongnan Mountain is very quiet with the sound of insects. A slightly thin figure appeared in the back mountain along the mountain road, and whispered and cursed while walking, "Damn Zhao's Haijing, I haven't taught me Kung Fu for so long, and that Lu Qingdu is the most hateful. I know that Xiao didn't I have learned Chuanzhen martial arts and I still have such a heavy hand." The figure sat down leaning on a big tree, and by the moonlight, a slightly immature face could be vaguely seen, but at this moment, there was a lot of bruise on this face. Oh! The boy sighed suddenly. At the beginning, Guo Bobojiang broke into the mountain gate. Although he was awe-inspiring, he offended many people. Unfortunately, the position of Mr. Chu Chuji in the gate was also quite embarrassing, otherwise Zhao's Haijing definitely dare not do this to me. Zhao's Haijing won't teach you, how can I teach you? A clear voice suddenly rang in the boy's ear. Who? The boy shouted loudly with a big change on the spot. You kid is meticulous. Xiao Tian leaped from a height, standing in front of the boy with a wine gourd in his hand, and smiled. The nasty things in Chuanzhen sect, even Guojing can't understand. Unexpectedly, at your young age, you have already seen the key. You are so clever and energetic, you are qualified to be a registered disciple of mine. Xiao Tian smiled at the young man. I'm not afraid of flashing my tongue when you speak big words, the young man said with a disdainful expression on his face when he heard the words. Although I don't know why you appeared behind Chuanzhen sect, you must have heard of Chuanzhen sect. Prestigious, my master is the leader of the 3 generations of Chuanzhen sect disciples, and the master and Uncle Tai are even the world-famous 7 scholars of Chuanzhen. No matter how strong you are, can you beat me, Uncle Chu Chuji? It's just that when the teenager said this, a faint sly color flashed across his face. Good you Yangguo. Xiao Tian couldn't help being a little dumb, shaking his head and laughing. You don't have to agitate me, you guys, although the 7th son of the true gods are not small, but they are just as capable, and they are still a little bit behind me. After talking about a point at Xiao Tian's feet, the whole person passed by like Pianhong, and instantly appeared dozens of steps behind Yangguo. What a fast speed! Yangguo was secretly surprised. Before he had time to speak, he saw Xiao Tian slap a palm on the big tree beside him, countless leaves flying. Xiao Tian grabbed a few leaves and flicked. The fragile leaves are embedded in the rocks beside it like cutting tofu. What a vigorous internal force! Yangguo's pupils suddenly enlarged. He had only seen this ability of picking leaves and flying flowers in his foster father, even his uncle Changchun Ziqiu Chuji couldn't do it. Is the person in front of him a master at the same level as his foster father? Dongzi Xidu, Nandi Beigai, except for his foster father, Zidu Yang Feng, neither Nandi nor Beigai would be dressed like this. Is it the father-in-law of Uncle Guo, Dongzi Huang Yaoshi? Junior Yangguo, dare to ask who is senior? Yang Qiaoping regained his excitement and said respectfully. My name is Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian looked at Yangguo and said with a smile, I just said that your kid is smart enough to be a named disciple of me. I wonder if you want it. Disciple Yangguo, I have seen master. Yang Guo was overjoyed when he heard the words, and quickly said respectfully, "It's too early to call master." Xiao Tian shook his head and threw the wine gourd in his hand to Yang Guo, and said, "At this time tomorrow, bring this wine gourd and come to Hushan to find me." After finishing the operation, Ling Bo took a micro-step, and the whole person quickly disappeared in front of Yang Guo. Yang Guo grabbed the wine gourd, thinking in his eyes. He believed that Senior Xiao Tian's actions before leaving had other meanings. Was it a test of that senior? This wine gourd seems a little light. Yang Guo grabbed the wine gourd and shook it, and then simply unplugged the stopper. A strong aroma of wine came out, but just smelling it made people feel a little stunned. However, apart from the aroma of the wine, there is not even a drop of wine in the wine gourd. That's it. When Yang Guo saw the empty wine gourd, a smile appeared on his face. It seemed that Senior Xiao Tian was testing his sincerity. Thinking of this, Yang Guo quickly collected the wine gourd and walked briskly to the Chongyang Palace. In the dark, Xiao Tian nodded slightly when he saw Yang Guo's reaction. The next day, Yang Guo listened to Zhao Haijing's superficial exercise formulas as usual. Zhao Haijing still did not teach him any moves. Yang Guo was dissatisfied, but he looked forward to the trip to the mountains at night. At night, a slightly thin figure slipped out of the Chongyang Palace and quietly ran to the back of Zongnan Mountain. "Senior Xiao, younger Yang Guo, please see you." Yang Guo bowed slightly to the distance and said respectfully. He still remembers that Xiao Tian said last night that it is not when he was called master, so he still matches his predecessors. "You kid is on time." Xiao Tian leaped down from a big tree, his moon-white robe was not stained with dust, just like a man in a fairy. "Senior Xiao, your wine gourd." Yang Guo respectfully handed the wine gourd to Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian took the wine gourd and picked it up. It was much heavier than before, and he unplugged the cork. The clear and bright wine of the gourd was exuding an attractive aroma. "Good wine." Xiao Tian took a sip, then his eyes lit up and smiled. "Senior is satisfied." Yang Guo heard a joyous expression on his face, and then took out a greased paper package from his arms and handed it to Xiao Tian. "How can I drink wine without good food? When the younger generation was wandering outside, I learned cooking from a cook for a few days. If you don't dislike this roast chicken, you might as well try it." After speaking, he handed the oil paper package to Xiao Tian. "You brat!" Xiao Tian looked at the still warm oiled paper package and nodded lightly. After a long while, Xiao Tian looked at the chicken bones all over the floor, snapped a flower branch, and said, "Well, if you have eaten your kid's roast chicken, if you don't say anything, you will inevitably be laughed at, saying that I am Xiao Tian. Stingy. Then I will teach you a sword technique, boy, look good." After talking about Xiao Tian's temperament suddenly changed. If Xiao Tian before gave people a feeling of clear and dusty, then Xiao Tian now seems to be a sharp sword out of its sheath, with a sharp edge. This type of sword trick has no name, but I summarized it from the Xiaoao sect of martial arts returning to the Tibetan sword. You can do it in a variety of ways, and I will break it by myself. As the voice fell, Xiao Tian moved. Like a glimpse of Pianhong, the whole person instantly disappeared in the same place, and the flower branch in his hand pointed out and pierced Yang Guo's eyebrows. Obviously it was such a straight stab, but Yang Guo felt that the vital parts of his body were covered by this flower branch, causing him to stand upright and cold sweat on his forehead. What a terrifying swordsmanship! There was a storm in Yang Guo's heart. Although he hadn't learned any martial arts skills from Zhao Haijing, he was after all the son of Wu Yangfeng, who had spent some time on Peach Blossom Island, and his knowledge was extraordinary. He has seen Huangrong's Yuxiao sword technique, which is chic and handsome, yet hides murderous intent. He has also seen Zhao Haijing's all-true sword technique, which has subtle changes. Although Zhao Haijing has not practiced it so superbly, it is also powerful. I even saw Chu Chuji practicing swords by chance. He stabs 18 swords in an instant. Each sword is divided into 3. When the stab is shot, there is only one move. Where the wrist is shaking, the sword moves are divided. 3. But he has never seen such a terrifying swordsmanship, pointing to the vitals of the whole body, not giving people a chance to breathe. The sword-like flower branch stayed at the center of Yang Guo's eyebrows, and the icy feeling came from the eyebrows, making Yang Guo feel as if he would be penetrated by this flower branch in the next moment, and he died on the spot. Boy, do you understand? Half a month later, at the back of Zhongnan Mountain, 2 figures stood in a clearing. The one on the left was dressed in a moon-white robe, holding a flower branch in his hands, and with a warm smile on his face. The person on the right is slightly thin, holding a long sword in his hand, and looking respectfully at the person on the left. Boy, it's been half a month, how did you understand the sword trick that you taught you at the beginning? Under the moonlight, Xiao Tian looked at Yang Guo, who was invigorated, and smiled. Senior, please look over. Yang Guo said with a serious expression, and the long sword in his hand was gently raised, and the temperament of his whole person instantly became sharp. After finishing speaking, the long sword in his hand was like a streamer piercing through the gap, straight towards Xiao Tian, while the tip of the sword kept trembling, faintly covering the vitals of Xiao Tian's body. Xiao Tian nodded lightly, worthy of Yang Guo. This comprehension is really nothing to say. He just demonstrated it that day, and then pointed Yang several times. I didn't expect that after only half a month, Yang Guo would be able to practice this style of swordsmanship until he was familiar with it. To the point. Not bad. Xiao Tian praised, and then slightly picked the flower branch in his hand, and the tip of the flower branch trembled, passing through Yang Guo's sword power and hitting the acupuncture point in his hand. Yang Guo's wrist was numb, and his sword fell to the ground. But it's still a bit of experience. Xiao Tian took Yang Guo's long sword back into his hand and smiled and said, now you have a perfect grasp of this type of sword move. It's a pity that you have insufficient experience against the enemy. I will give it to you. I found a sword stone, if you can defeat her, I will teach you another skill. Follow me. After Xiao Tian finished speaking, he walked quickly towards the tomb of Huishan. Yang Guo quickly followed. There is an ancient tomb at the back of Zhongnan Mountain, which was built by the founder of Chuanzhen sect, Wang Chongyang, to fight against the Golden Soldiers. After the defeat of the rebels, Wang Chongyang lived in the tomb with anger. The heroine Lin Chaoying had a deep affection for him, lamenting that he was buried in the tomb with his great skill, so he was tricked out of the stone tomb by the fierce General Law, and the two went hand in hand. However, Wang Chongyang didn't know Lin Chaoying's affection because of his heart knot. Lin Chaoying thought that Wang Chongyang looked down on her, and eventually competed with him in Zhongnanshan to win the bet on the stone tomb. Since then, he has lived in the tomb and never returned for life. And this tomb of the living dead has also become the forbidden place of Chuanzhen sect, but the silence of this forbidden place today is broken by the arrival of a few uninvited guests. Li Machu. Master used to be a master and apprentice, but he just kicked you out of the ancient tomb. Unexpectedly, you didn't expect you to be a thief and come back to grab the Heart Sutra. In the open space outside the ancient tomb, two women stood opposite each other, and one of them yelled. The girl was dressed in a thin white cloth, as if she was in the smoke and mist. She seemed to be about 16 or 17 years old, except for her black hair. Her whole body was white, her face was beautiful and exquisite, but her skin was small. There was a layer of blood, and it looked abnormally pale. It's so beautiful. Yang Guo, who was hiding in the dark, was young after all. When he first saw this woman, he couldn't help but lose consciousness for a moment, and he couldn't help but exclaim in a low voice. Who? Although Yang Guo's voice was soft, he was heard by another woman dressed as a Taoist ant, with bright eyes and white teeth, and immediately snorted coldly. As soon as the voice fell, a few silver needles with carved patterns shot out from her fingertips and flew straight to where Yang Guo was hiding. Senior sister, you are really mad." The white-clothed woman murmured softly, and a white silk wrapped around Jinling flew out of the white-clothed woman's robe sleeves, stopped in front of Yang Guo, and shot the silver needle flying. Kilian Fairy Li Machu, hat, what a mighty prestige! Xiao Tian's figure appeared on a big tree next to Yang Guo's hiding place at some point. He broke a branch and threw it to Yang Guo, laughing. Said, "Boy, this ant is the sword test stone I found for you. If you defeat her, I will teach you another skill." Yang Guo took the branch with a bitter face, and said in a low voice, "Senior, are you kidding me? Fairy Kilian Li Machu has heard of Li Machu's name, his martial arts are strong and cruel, if he confronts Li Machu, he is basically hanged." Xiao Tian glanced at Yang Guo, with a playful look on his face, "Are you afraid?" "I'm not afraid," Yang Guo grumbled with a bitter face. "The main reason is that Li Machu has been practicing martial arts for many years, and his internal strength is far stronger than mine." Yang Guo was not afraid of a fight with Li Machu. After all, Xiao Tian was watching. He believed that even if he could not beat Li Machu, there would be no danger. He was mainly afraid of losing face to Xiao Tian. "Have you two whispered enough?" The conversation between Yang Guo and Xiao Tian angered Li Machu, who was on the sidelines, thinking that her reputation as a fairy resounded throughout the Central Plains martial arts. Today in front of this ancient tomb, I was ignored by two unknown people. Try the sword stone? Grandma Ant will send you to see the king and go to the king to try the sword. As Li Machu raised his right hand, a few ice soul silver needles popped out of his fingertips and flew straight to Xiao Tian and Yang Guo. "The whole body is vital. Be careful," Xiaolong hurriedly reminded, and at the same time Yinchuo Jinling struck out, trying to intercept the Bing Gapao Yinzhen, but Li Machu's shot was too sudden. When Xiaolong reacted, Yinzhen had reached Xiao in front of Tian and Yang Guo. "Ah!" Xiao Tian sighed suddenly, and saw that he grabbed a few leaves out of thin air with his right hand. He grabbed a few fallen leaves and threw them out. There were a few explosions in the air, and several silver needles were knocked away, pierced obliquely into the trunk on the side, but the leaf was cast unabated and directly hit Li Machu. Li Machu's body trembled, only to feel that the internal strength of many years of cultivation was suddenly reluctant. No matter how she used her internal power, she couldn't mobilize a trace of internal strength. What is this method? Li Machu's eyes were wide open and her face was full of horror. She thought that although her strength was not as good as the Central Plains 5 Jews, she was also considered a first-class master. Who knew that she was actually sealed by a few leaves today? This method, even the Central Plains Wuzhou can't do it, right? Boy, I have sealed her internal strength, this time is okay. Xiao Tian didn't care about Li Machu's shocked expression, but turned to look at Yang Guo and smiled. Yang Guo nodded seriously. He was just afraid of Li Machu's vigorous internal strength. After all, he hadn't practiced any other internal strength methods except for the half-dangling toad gong taught by Wu Yangfeng. His internal strength was far worse than Li Machu's. Far. But now that Li Machu is sealed off, he naturally has nothing to fear. Yang Guo swung the branch in his hand and made a starting gesture, then looked at Li Machu, and said solemnly, "Yang Guo, please enlighten me." After speaking, he rushed to Li Machu. The branch in his hand pierced straight out, and the tip of the branch was constantly trembling, faintly covering Li Machu's whole body. Li Machu's expression suddenly became solemn. If she could use her internal strength, even if Yang Guo's trick was so subtle, she would not take it to heart. Because there is too much difference in the internal strength of the two sides, she doesn't need to consider how to dismantle her moves. She can break Yang Guo's moves with her powerful internal strength. But now she couldn't use her internal strength. Facing Yang Guo's hidden sword with countless changes, she naturally did not dare to despise it. With a flick of the floating dust in his hand, the tail of the dust swept through the air like a dense cloud, entangled the branches that Yang Guo had pierced, and the hand holding the dust handle twisted hard, and the dust handle and the branches were twisted together to stop Yang Guo's move. When Li Macha saw this, a touch of disdain appeared on his face, and he sneered, "Swordsmanship is an exquisite swordsmanship. It is a pity that you have too little experience, so it is a violent thing to fall into your hands." After speaking, he looked at Xiao Tian provocatively. Xiao Tian's expression was indifferent, his expression remained unchanged, but Yang Guo's face showed a touch of anger. His right hand suddenly exerted force, breaking the branch that was entangled in the dust, and then he held half of the branch and suddenly pierced it out. Unlike the previous thorn, Yang Guo didn't know the details of Li Macha's martial arts before, so he still has some reservations, but this thorn did his best. The branches were like the light in the sky. Before Li Macha could react, he passed the dust in her hands directly. The sharp wood stubble touched Li Macha's neck and pierced the skin. A stream of red blood flowed down the white and slender neck. Eye-catching. Although Liu Qingdu's martial arts is only third-rate, he is indeed a true master of Zhao's Haijing and the attainments of Chuanzhen swordsmanship. A trick drunk and greedy was carried out by him. The sword is so powerful that he is really amazing. A touch of disdain flashed in Yang Guo's eyes. He picked up a branch and slapped it, and then stabbed it straight out. The branch pierced the shadow of the heavy sword and placed it precisely on Liu Qingdu's wrist. It was as if the scene where Xiao Tian shot down the long sword in Yang Guo's hand was reappearing, Liu Qingdu's wrist numb, and the long sword fell to the ground. Yang Guo didn't even look at him, turned and left. He couldn't even mention the interest in mockery of such a third-rate stuff. Only Liu Qingdu was left alone and doubting his life. He couldn't think of how Yang Guo, who was easily slammed by him half a month ago, suddenly seemed to be a different person. You must know that the trouble he deliberately asked Yang Guo was not once or twice. Even if Yang Guo resisted before, he was just taking his own humiliation, but now, Yang Guo just used a branch to shoot down the long sword in his hand. Even his master Zhao's Haijing can't do that level, right? At night, a thin figure slipped out of the Chongyang Palace and walked straight to the back mountain of Zhongnan Mountain. After a while, another figure walked away from the Chongyang Palace with a sneer on his face and whispered, "No wonder it can defeating Qingdu, this little beast is really strange." This figure is no one else, it is the master of Liu Qingdu and Yang Guo, the champion of 3 generations of Chuanzhen martial arts disciples, Zhao's Haijing. After Liu Qingdu was defeated by Yang Guo during the day, he returned to the Chongyang Palace and told Zhao's Haijing what had happened. Zhao's Haijing had some doubts at first, so why did Yang Guo defeat his proud disciple? But Liu Qingdu said it so confidently. Zhao's Haijing also knew that his disciple was not a targetless person, and finally decided to observe Yang Guo in secret. Who knows that by looking at it, we found something amazing. It's really God who helped me. Zheng Xiao didn't have a chance to drive this little beast out of the door wall, so the little beast came to the door by himself. The sneer on Zhao's Haijing's face was even worse, and Jin Yan's contribution unfolded and followed silently. Yang passed behind him. Before long, Yang Guo went to the open space outside the ancient tomb, looked at the sky, and said loudly, "Senior Xiao, Yang Guo, please see you." "You kid is punctual," Xiao Tian's voice came from a big tree. Yang Qiuxun walked away and saw Xiao Tian sitting on a branch with his back leaning on the trunk, and his white robe made him look like a fairy. "Middleman. However, your kid is too careless, isn't someone secretly peeping to find out?" Xiao Tian's voice came from a long time, and then he jumped down from the tree and sneered, "The Quanzonist, ask me, will you please come out personally?" The reason why Xiao Tian emphasized the 3 words Chuanzhen sect was because he noticed that there was more than one peeping person. He glanced at the pile of rocks not far away without a trace, and shook his head slightly. He didn't expect that the little dragon girl, who was as cold as a fairy in the sky, would be so curious. "Hey! Yang Guo, I didn't expect that your little beast would dare to trespass into the forbidden grounds of Chuanzhen sect. Even Master Chu Chu can't keep you this time." You can just roll down the mountain for me. Zhao Haijing walked out from the dark with his face with a sneer on him. He then turned his gaze to Xiao Tian and scolded, "And you, sneaky, what is your plan to sneak into the realm of my Chuanzhen sect?" Xiao Tian glanced at Zhao Haijing and sighed suddenly, "You can also become the first of the 3 generations of Chuanzhen disciples. It seems that Chuanzhen sect is indeed no one after Wang Chongyang." After speaking, I looked at Yang Guo, "Boy, unless you kill this person, otherwise you can't hide the fact that you broke into the real Forbidden Land. What are you going to do?" Yang Guo's expression became dignified after hearing this. Although he was awkward, he was not the kind of horrible temperament. Although Zhao Haijing had done too much, he still did not die. It's just that he didn't know if Xiao Tian was testing him, and he hesitated for a while. Yang Guo didn't speak, but Zhao Haijing opened his mouth, and sneered at Xiao Tian, "You are so big that you despise my Chuanzhen sect. Today, the Taoist master will let you see and understand. I Chuanzhen sect is really nobody." After speaking, the Qing Feng sword in his hand was unsheathed, and it pierced Xiao Tian's throat with the Guanhe Mengduan full true sword technique. Xiao Tian sighed secretly, "Why are there so many eyesight? Li Machu is like this, so is Zhao Haijing." With a hook on his toe, a stone bounced from the ground and fell into his hand, and then flicked his finger. The stone was like a meteor from the sky, directly hitting Zhao Haijing's chest, causing him to spout a mouthful of blood on the spot. "This is a magical power." Zhao Haijing's expression suddenly became frightened, and he shouted angrily, "Who is Yaoshi Huang? You can't martial arts, nor your eyesight." Xiao Tian shook his head, "Chuanzhen sect is really unmanned." He just popped up the stone by borrowing the hidden weapon technique in the life and death talisman, and deliberately avoided Zhao Haijing's vitals, otherwise the blow alone would kill Zhao Haijing on the spot. "You wait for me." Zhao Haijing's face turned redder when he heard Xiao Tian's words, and he shouted angrily, "I don't care about your relationship with Huang Yaoshi, but since it insults my Chuanzhen sect, the matter will not end so easily. There is a kind of you waiting here. Get off!" Xiao Tian snorted coldly, and Zhao Haijing hurriedly stumbled towards the Chongyang Palace. Xiao Tian turned his gaze to Yang Guo and said with a smile, "Boy, if Zhao Haijing is allowed to return to Chuanzhen sect, you will probably not be able to stay in Chuanzhen sect in the future. Now if you have to catch up with him and kill him, there is still time to do so. Make your own decision. Senior." Although this Zhao Haijing is hateful, he is not guilty of death. Yang Guo hesitated, then said, "It's just that if he is expelled from Chuanzhen sect, the juniors don't know what to do in the future." "You slippery boy," Xiao Tian cursed with a grin, "no matter, this matter has nothing to do with me, so let's take you as a disciple." "Disciple Yang Guo, pay homage to master." Yang Guo quickly said excitedly. "No hurry." Xiao Tian nodded, then cast his gaze on the pile of rocks and smiled, "Who is in the pile of rocks? Can you please be a witness? Is there anyone else?" Yang Guo heard the words and cast his gaze on the pile of rocks, just to see a white figure come out of the pile of rocks. "Little dragon girl from the tomb sect. I have seen seniors. If the seniors don't dislike them, the juniors are willing to be a testimony." Xiao Long bowed slightly to Xiao Tian. She had seen Xiao Tian's skills and naturally did not dare to be negligent. "In that case, there is Miss Lao Long." Xiao Tian nodded gently. After that, the 3 of them briefly prepared, and the soil was incense. Yang Guo respectfully knocked 3 times to Xiao Tian, which was regarded as a formal establishment of a master-disciple relationship. "Ding! Congratulations to the host for accepting the first disciple, and obtaining the achievement rewarding 50 teacher points and a random chance to draw a lottery." Ding! Since the host officially accepts disciples, the main mission of the Saint Master is activated and the reputation system is activated. The cold voices of the system sounded one after another, attracting Xiao Tian's attention. "System, What's the main task? Xiao Tian asked the system in his heart. The main task of the Saint Master is the goal that the host needs to achieve after crossing a certain plane, the system's voice quickly sounded. What is the current main task? Xiao Tian asked, and at the same time faintly guessed, I'm afraid this task has nothing to do with Yangguo. The current main line is to teach Yangguo to reach the pinnacle of the divine carving plane, the voice of the system sounded, confirming Xiao Tian's guess. What is the prestige system? Xiao Tian continued to ask. Please explore by yourself. The prestige accumulates to a certain level to obtain mysterious rewards. The system did not answer this time, but left a very appetizing sentence. Xiao Tian was lost in thought when he heard the words, but before he could find a way out, noisy footsteps came from a distance, and countless torches were connected together, like a long dragon. Head, master, and uncles, it is this thief who sneaked into my true forbidden ground and spoke insults to my true teaching. Seeing his skill, I might have something to do with Huang Yaoshi. Xiao Tian was beaten to vomit blood before. Zhao's Haijing said to the headed Taoist priest who looked a little weak. This Taoist friend, who teaches Maju under the leadership of Xia Chuanzhen, I don't know what the friend wants to sneak into my Chuanzhen forbidden land. Although Maju was a little sluggish because of his age, he was still full of breath in his words. Brother, I told him so much about what he was doing. This man sneaked into my all-forbidden ground and injured Haijing, so I should take it down first, and then slowly interrogate. Wang Chuiai is impatient. And the lover was injured again, immediately said. After speaking, he drew out the long sword at his waist, stepped on his feet, and attacked Xiao Tian. Xiao Tian sneered when he saw this, and turned to look at Yangguo. Since you have worshipped me as a teacher, then I should also teach you some useful skills. You are optimistic. After talking with a single tap, the whole person is like wearing a butterfly. Wang Chu's fierce sword force was avoided by him one by one, and even Xiao Tianyi's corner was not touched. Chuanzhen's 7 sons don't seem to have a mere fame. Xiao Tian smiled while avoiding Wang Chui's attack with ease. You 6 go together. Hao Datong's temper was not very good either. Seeing Xiao Tian's ridicule, he couldn't help but yelled, Brother Wang, I'll help you. Before he finished his words, he drew out his long sword and attacked Xiao Tian with Wang Chuiai.